So, good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, and welcome to the Slaying of Ages podcast. And today we have a special treat. I'm talking with Grammy winning, renowned saxophonist Ron Blake. Ron, how are you?
I'm doing great, Preston. Thanks for having me on the show.
Oh,
Appreciate
fantastic
it.
to have you. Yeah, and I have to admit that I don't know your music. I haven't seen you play live, but I've heard you a million times. And one thing that really intrigued me about mistaken identity is that I have seen your producer Bobby Broom a few times when I lived in Chicago, and was pretty familiar with his work and some of his recent albums.
Okay. Yeah. When were you in Chicago?
I live in Georgia now. I'm in Atlanta, Georgia. Been here for
Uh-huh.
7 years, but before that, I was in Rogers Park for 10 years,
Wow. Okay.
and
Yeah.
gave me the experience of seeing some really great jazz artists from Evanston. And I know that you're very familiar with the area since you've lived there for a while.
Yeah. Yeah. I went to school up there and I lived in Evanston for about 8 years total, including school. So yeah, and that was, where I met Bobby and where I started playing um professionally or just playing in clubs, going, sitting in at jam sessions, the Green Mill,
Right, right.
hanging out around Von Freeman, lots of Von Freeman, Lynn Halliday,
Mhm.
Brad Good, Dennis Carroll, George Flutis. The list goes on and on. But those were my formative years before I left Chicago. Was hanging out and trying to figure things out on that scene, and it was very very healthy scene. I always tell people that, starting out. One of the things that I really love about the Chicago scene. I don't know how much it's changed in years past, but at that time, if you just showed an interest in playing,
Mhm.
as a young player just trying to break into the scene, everyone embraced you,
Wow.
and there were no real cliques in the music scene. So, you know, I was doing, I guess, what they call club dates out here on the East Coast, but everything from playing wedding receptions and hotel, rooms and stuff like that, to playing with the elder statesmen on the scene, some of the established AACM people, blues, reggae, anything and everything, big band. If you were out and you wanted to play and people saw that you were trying to learn, you played all sorts of music. And I think that that was the one thing that was super beneficial for me starting out there, because I never tried to limit myself. I mean, I focused at some point on trying to get my voice together on the instrument,
Mhm.
hanging out around people like Vaughn a lot and putting a band together, playing with Bobby for some years as I transitioned from alto to tenor and stuff like that. But yeah, it was just a really happening scene. There was like a instrumental fusion scene.
Mhm.
Bethany Pickens was, doing a lot of stuff. I worked with her. Daryl Jones would float back into town every once in a while, and
Right.
it's like, and you were everywhere. You weren't just like, oh, I'm doing this kind of music and just these kind of gigs. So I thought that was very very healthy, and I used to encourage young players, when they were asking me about, starting out, um about, oh, I want to come to New York and I want to, you know break into the scene in New York, and I was like, there's other places where you can get really good training and be around masters, firsthand, and learn the music. And then, New York is always going to be here. It's not going anywhere. And but it can swallow you up if you're not ready for it, I would
Sure.
say. I came to New York, I was in my late 20s when I finally came. But I like I said, I played many years on the scene in Chicago. Started teaching, and then I got a teaching gig, so had some experience under my belt, and sort of had some idea of what it is I wanted to do before I finally arrived on the scene in 1992.
So as a band leader, you've had a number of solo albums, but I
Mhm.
imagine you're getting the question, and it's kind of obvious. There's a 15-year gap between
Mhm.
new album and the last one, which was Shayari?
Shirey.
Yes, on Mac Avenue,
Yeah.
2008.
Yeah.
But as you talked about, you've been doing some other gigs in terms of teaching and, of course, your work with Saturday Night Live band. Why was there that gap, though? Why?
Um, that's a good. I mean, you know, I think everyone's just curious about that. I think you know, a lot of things happen, but I think making the transition from being on the road all the time, which was my sustenance, not just as a living, but but creatively. I really thrived from being on the road, all the time, playing with the same people,
Mhm,
night in, night out for years. And I was fortunate to have a lot of good um, situations like that professionally. Um, I think it became challenging for me, and I know for the label too at the time, Mac Avenue. You know,
mhm,
with me um, having the full time gig with Saturday Night Live, um, and then I also eventually sort of fell into a full time position at Juilliard. So it wasn't easy for me to go out and promote recordings
sure.
on a regular. And I had some ideas too, maybe a bit too lofty back then about what I was hoping to lay out as a foundation for different projects that I wanted to do.
Mhm,
And maybe we didn't see eye to eye on uh, how that progression should happen in terms of building my brand, within their catalog. So we went our separate ways. But then after that, I mean, I think really just being at home and having the time to be um, a parent, more full time, um, and be in New York, be local. It's just a different kind of thing. So I think my focus for a while drifted. I wouldn't say that I was being any less creative. I just My career was growing in other ways,
sure.
and I was able to focus on other things. And so coming back to the record, doing this record now was it's been more I feel pretty settled now in life in general, and I wanted to document that, plain
Okay.
and simple. So that's been the huge gap was not without a lot of recordings, obviously, with my,
Mhm.
longtime associations like Christian McBride,
Christian McBride,
um,
right?
you know, big band, so many of his projects. I've been involved with him for years. Um, yeah, I mean, just so many different things. But like I said, those things sort of started to wane as it became difficult. Saturday nights are a big night in the if you're playing on the road professionally, those are like
Sure.
big nights for venues and stuff like that. So you know I can't I can't take the gig and play the first two nights and then sub out on the that didn't work too well. So just sort of settled into to things and tried to do as much stuff as I could as a sideman and locally and run out when I could.
Mhm.
But the focus definitely shifted. After I did Shirey, I was like, oh, okay, let me see how I can make this new lifestyle, being a local musician,
Mhm.
on the scene, work for me.
Well, you took a big leap, though, in term, or maybe it wasn't. You can correct me. In
Uh,
terms of starting your own record company for Mistaken Identity.
mm, hmm Well, I actually started mm, a label years ago before I signed to Mac Avenue and then got picked up by Mac Avenue.
Mhm.
So the first record that they put out was actually this my second solo
Okay.
album on my label, but they picked it up, the one with Lest We Forget
Lest we
with
forget. Okay.
yeah, the Christian produced and
Wow.
featured the late great, I can't believe still like yesterday, but Joey DeFrancesco and
Organist, right?
Greg, yeah,
Wow.
amazing human being that we just lost recently, and Gregory Hutchinson
Gregory Hutcherson.
on drums.
Okay. Mhm.
My second that I did on my now defunct label, Tommen Records, was produced by Michael Carvin and featured again Gregory Hutchinson, um, Ruben Rogers, my homeboy from the Virgin Islands, who's
Mhm.
also featured on Mistaken Identity, and Shedrick Mitchell, amazing B3 player and pianist, composer, orchestrator, um, and I had Johnny Griffin as a
Wow.
special guest. You know, so that you probably are going to see that resurface in my catalog on the new label.
Mhm.
So the label thing isn't new to me, although the music business is new to me. It's changed a lot.
Sure.
Back in those days, I would get on the phone and uh, call up a few people and take. I used to walk CDs into Tower Records
Yeah.
downtown in the village, you know, and they'd give me some money. I'd say, okay, okay, yeah, let's get 10 more for now. We'll be into, that sort of thing. And yeah, but now everything is changed. So, just learning the business again, but really confident that at this time, I think for musicians, for artists, I mean, just having control of your music so that you can exploit it in the best way possible to, get it in the to the ears of the audience that you wanted to, be in front of, is important. So I was happy to jump on that opportunity again. It wasn't something that I had, that was absolutely new to me.
Great. So let's talk a little bit more about Mistaken Identity because it was recorded in a relatively short period of time, but the recording
Mhm.
started in 2019. Am I correct in that?
I believe it was 2018. I can't even remember now. It may have been 2018. That was the first session,
Mhm.
the first big session, and there was a little bit of delay, sort of figuring out how we were going to finish it up. We needed a couple more minutes, and sat on it for a while, and then uh, you know as I was figuring that out, we sort of, transitioned into what became the lockdown as we now know it, of 2020. So there was a pause for a while. There was just really didn't know how I was going to continue with that. At the time that I finally decided with Bobby that we should go back and just record a few more things to finish the record out, and make it a full length CD.
Mhm.
Um, we were in the midst of the lockdown, so that was a little bit. A bit more of a strategic sort of thing that made that all come together. Um, but we did it. We made it happen. I think I did. The other session for that really didn't happen until it must have been like January of 2021, and that was, being in the studio, you know 50 feet apart from everyone, masks on, and it
Right.
was just surreal. But I tell you, um, just being able to do that was probably one of the most healing experiences for me. So that's when, like the songs like "To Be,"
Okay.
Ruben's song, "Grace Ann," the duet
Mhm.
with Ruben, the Calypso, finishing up the Calypso. That's when that stuff happened, and it was just as you can imagine, I mean, at this point, I'd been sitting at home. I was fortunate that SNL was still happening, and I was
Right.
going in there, once a week to do that. But other than that, I was recording tracks from home and
Mhm.
sitting on Zoom like this, sitting on Zoom, teaching classes and lessons and stuff like that. So to actually be in a room with musicians playing live again, I can't begin to describe how joyful and tearful, tears of joy, you
Right.
know, for sure. So yeah, so and then it took some time to with this, really had the wherewithal to move forward with finishing, um, just getting it ready to put out into the world. So
So you have 2 original compositions on the album, Beyond
mhm.
Yesterday's Tomorrows, and you mentioned Graceland. Were those both done in the initial 2000, was it 19 session?
18, no, no, those were well, yes, well, I lie. Beyond Yesterday's Tomorrow. But Grace Ann was done in the COVID session. But the other song was done in the original session. Yeah, yeah,
So
yeah,
when you
yeah.
started the original session, did you have a concept in mind of mixing, well, they're not really standard, some great covers and also the original material?
Um, if I mean, I'll throw this out there just because I think that it was sort of the impetus for us um, choosing the bassists that we did and how that all came together. But outside of me being ready to just document where I was at the time and feeling like, okay, I need to make a record. It's time. You know, I had been spending a lot more time thinking about what I was doing on the horn, practicing a lot more, just in a good space, and feeling like it was time to just document that. So I didn't have I put together a collection of songs that I thought would feel good and be easy to sort of put together. It was definitely less programmed or thought out than my previous recordings,
Oh, okay.
from beginning to end, I would say. Um, it was just more about, let's document this period
Mhm,
in my in the progression here, and just went back and forth with Bobby about stuff like that. Some of these tunes I recorded before, but maybe in different arrangements of them.
mhm, mhm,
um and for example, Is That So, I'd never recorded before, the Duke Pearson composition. But when I did lead bands and go out and play, that was always my set opener.
mm,
And so when I went into the studio, as we were kind of getting sounds together and kind of getting a feel for things, it was just like, well, let's start with this, since that's usually what I do anyway. And it turned out to be a good decision. I mean, I have to say that I was fortunate. I had every bit of confidence in Bobby as a producer, that I could really just focus on playing when I was in the room, you know. So I deferred to him a lot of times, just in terms of like, how how's it going? Yeah, no, that was good. Maybe let's, that sort of thing. I was just you are here to play the saxophone. And that's, I mean, that's what a good producer does,
right.
you know. But yeah, I from previous, I've had some great producers,
Great.
obviously. Michelle and Digiacello worked with me on one record, Michael Caine, Michael Carvin, as I mentioned, on the my first record that
Mhm,
needs to be put out again, and Christian. So, everybody has a different method, but I think that especially working with Michelle, at that point having had done some a lot of jazz recordings. It was the first time I worked with someone that was so in depth in the preparation and concept part of the recording session.
You
You
don't
know,
mean
I
you're not
mean,
talking arrangement, you're talking about the
we're
technical
talking
piece?
about concept, we're talking about music, we're talking about putting together playlists of 30 or more songs
Wow,
and going like, hey, this is the vibe. These are some of the vibes I'm trying to get to. Not necessarily original music, just like vibe.
vibe. Mhm,
And then going back and forth, like that. Which would happen after that because once I learned that process, I was like, oh, this is the way to do it. This is the way to get to certain things. Um, but once we kind of settled in on like, okay, this is the what the vibe is going to be, then she was like, okay, now go write some music, which I did, and that was Sonic Tonic. So, you
mhm.
know, I think her and there was another producer that I work with. I should mention too that she introduced me to because the first recording that I did with Michelle was on a record called Red Hot and Riot. It was a tribute to Fela Kuti,
Mm.
and she was a guest artist on that, and she brought me in to play saxophone on that. And I met the producer Andres Levin, who I went on to join a collaborative that he was putting together called Yerba Buena. Um, and again, a different sort of producer, different music, different approach, but I learned a lot also working with him. And I think that part of it, I think for young musicians, if there's anything I can share in this format as we're just having this conversation, yeah, playing well and having great ideas for music that translates, all of that is fine. But I think that like everything that you want to have some legs or life to it, I think you have some longevity. I think it's important to do a deep dive. Sometimes it's not about referencing other music. Sometimes it's just about reading. Sometimes it's about checking out film.
Expanding your
Sometimes it's about,
perspective.
yeah, sometimes it's about going to the museum
Mhm,
and hanging out for a few hours, you know, and then starting to reflect on these extra musical things to see how you can sort of, you know, present something. So in that in that regard, I feel like you know, I've had from the very beginning, I've had producers that have brought that aspect of it with them, and I've learned from it. So I've never been a producer on any of my sessions,
mhm.
but I was equally involved in the preparation, what's it going to sound like, you know, like Sonic Tonic, for example, there were three drummers at the date, uh, two bass players, you know, and sometimes it was like we did the same track with different
Like,
combinations,
like,
and Michelle would go, oh, yeah, this is it. So that kind of thing I think is important for people to consider. I mean, it might not, it might not be the thing of like going into a studio with a working band and just documenting what you're doing. It might be it, but I'm interested in making records, and I think that's a s- slightly different thing than just documenting a live performance of a band.
sure. Mistaken identity obviously is cohesive, even though there was that gap that we talked about in terms of a few
Hmm.
years. In terms of the writing, because we talked about the 2 originals you wrote, were you planning on writing more originals, or did you always have the concept of bringing in some of these great jazz songs?
So I think, yeah, thanks. That's a good question. As I've learned from producers, mentors along the way. Um, I think it's always good to recognize the people that have been instrumental,
Mm,
indirectly or directly,
mhm,
you know, to your story. And as you've mentioned, as I've been coming back to the studio now for the first time in 15 years, um, I thought it would be fitting to start with music by people that have been mentors to me in some way. So the Johnny Griffin tune, a little bit of a that's Griff was like a father figure, mentor to me. But in tipping my hat to him and selecting that song, for example, that with the quintet, because Johnny recorded that song on the Tenors of Our Time
okay,
recording. So when we went out on tour with that record, that was my ballad feature. So I was sort of, paying homage to Griff, but I was also giving a nod to Roy um, at the time, who I'd seen um, shortly before I went into the studio, and we, hung out a little bit. And so that was like one of the connections. Sonny Rollins looms large for any
sure,
serious improviser, and I have the coincidence, which doesn't give me any of the the saxophoning and musicality that he has, but um, I share the same birthday with him, and I happen to be from the Virgin Islands.
mm,
His people were from the Virgin Islands, that sort of thing. But Sonny has always, just been, for me, I'm like, whoa. And I've been fortunate to hear him play live several times. So I wanted to play something of his, but I wanted to
okay,
play something that was maybe not so well known, but and also very lyrical sort of thing.
mhm,
Um, so that's why I selected Allison. And then finally, the Benny Golson composition goes without saying. Benny Golson is probably, he's walked alongside me ever since I came to New York. I met him very early on. His rhythm section were friends of mine, Dwayne Berna, who's now gone, Kevin Hayes, that I played with a lot. And they said, Benny needs to hear you. You need to meet Benny. And once I met Benny, we've been, you know, like this, ever since. So I felt a little bit more comfortable or confident um, stretching the boundaries on his composition, Stablemates, his classic composition, Stablemates, by reharmonizing it a bit. Um,
okay,
and so
stabilize,
I wanted to do the song, but I also wanted to just kind of jump into you know, the deep end of the pool. And I'm glad that he enjoyed it. He has heard it, and he's like, "Oh yeah, I forget what I forget how he phrased it. Something like you put a new dress on the song or something. I can't remember what it was that he said, but he said it. He enjoyed it, so that was great. So I mean, so that's always sort of been a part of my thing. On my records, it might not be like directly in your face like that, but there's always like some sort of reference to maybe a saxophone hero of mine, like
mhm,
maybe covering a song that they did, even if it's an arrangement of it, not like their version of it or anything. So I don't want to touch it in that sense. I just want to, give a nod to them and thank them and recognize, their greatness and their impact on my musical journey. So that speaks to the part of the covers, the additional covers. And then after that, I mean, Bobby's Blues,
Mhm.
um, that was one of the first songs I learned when I worked with him in Chicago, years and years ago. So we played that melody many, many times. So it was not that was sort of like, oh, this is a no-brainer. Let's
Mhm.
just revisit this. And you know, Ruben's composition, really beautiful, really simple lyrical melody. I thought, yeah, let's add this to the list. And
Which one is that?
to be,
GB. Okay.
yeah. And then finally the title track,
Yes.
I reached out to my I reached out to my good friend from the Virgin Islands, Victor Provost, that I work with um, in a band that's led by my dear friend Dion Parson, called the 21st Century Band. Went in the studio. You got something? I need something. I want a calypso. I want, just something.
Right.
And I'm thinking I'm going to record it on baritone saxophone. And he was like, yeah, I got these two things. I'm going to send them to you tomorrow. Let me know what you think.
Mhm.
And I heard, so when I recorded, it was like, that was the one. I recorded it, didn't, it was done. It put it away. It was just sitting there. And as we were putting the project together and finalizing, like, what's this going to be? What's this, title? And I was like, how about the calypso? No one would think that, so I just went with that. It just felt right. And I think he's a brilliant writer. I think, um, you know, of the musicians, there's a lot of great musicians from the Virgin Islands. I've mentioned Ruben already. Um, but Victor, I think, is as a steel panist, has definitely made a name for himself in the music world. And I just thought it would be great to showcase his compositional skill.
So with
It's
regard
something
to the
fun like that.
arrangements, I'm
Hmm.
sorry. With regard
Go
to the
ahead.
arrangements, were most of those done before you hit the studios?
Oh, some of the stuff, yes. Some of the stuff, yes. But um, it definitely, I had left a lot of room for stuff to develop in the studio as
Mhm.
well.
Mhm.
That's the great thing about having amazing musicians in the room with you. Um, Sometimes the interaction creates,
Right.
a spark, and you take things in a different direction, or you realize that, oh yeah, this needs to happen this way instead of what I was thinking. You might have, like I said, as much as I tried to step away from the producer part of it, I definitely did have some ideas of what I wanted to have happen. But you don't hire great musicians and then just have them, follow a script.
Mhm.
I mean, that's sort of pointless, at least in this type of music.
Right.
So,
Yes.
yeah, so there's just a lot of things evolved.
Mhm.
The arrangement on "Is That So" definitely came together in the studio.
Okay.
Um, to be, yeah, a lot. I mean, a lot of them sort of happened as they were being recorded, as we were putting them together and kind of talking through things. And we play for a while, and it's like, oh, yeah, okay, yeah, no, let's do this. And it's like, okay, cool, great, okay, well then, let's just do a fresh take. Cool, no problem. Boom, you know. So that part of it, the camaraderie there, and the very sort of laid back vibe in the studio, I think also translates to the record, which do we call them records anymore? What do we call what do we
I call
call
them
them?
records. I'm just my age. I call them records. Mhm.
Yeah,
Mhm.
might be my age too. Yeah, it you know it just I think that translated really well, and it was, I think, ultimately what I was hoping to get at. I had no definite outcome in mind outside of it feeling good and being something that people besides musicians would want to listen to.
Absolutely. It is that.
Music for the masses.
I mean, it's warm, and if you dig beyond the surface and look into some of the compositions and where they came from in terms of the original artists, it's educational, and I think that really works. Now, I know you've done a few gigs in New York to support the album. What are your
Mhm.
tour plans beyond that?
Well, I'm going to try to see if I can do one-offs during the winter where I can. I just did something this week up in Harlem and with them again, and don't have anything on the books immediately, but it's a little bit challenging with the SNL schedule, and we're actually um, sort of a little bit heavy on the second half of the season this
Wow.
year. I think sort of making up for, maybe the strike and starting a little bit late and stuff like that. So it's going to be tricky for me to put together anything, substantial. But if I can do things on the East Coast, if I can put together things on the East Coast that it's, reasonably easy for folks to get in and out of town,
Mhm.
have a weekend off. You know, I intend to do that and really try to hit the road, have things going by next summer when I have time, when I'm off from the show and I'm off from school. So.
Yeah, you still have your
But
Juilliard gig. Well,
I'll work tomorrow though if you call me.
the life of a working
I'm a
musician.
I I'm available.
But I mean, with your endeavors at Juilliard and Saturday Night Live, that's a lot.
It is, but I love it. Teaching has always been something that's been a part of my life. I've been teaching since I was 16 years old. In some shape or form, and sort of fell into it. It wasn't something that I pursued, um, but I love it, and it's a great way to learn too. You know, because students, I mean, so incredibly intelligent, and honestly, they have access to so much more information than we did when we were starting out, and so that always brings some really incredible talent to the table, and then it's just like, how can you help them if necessary, to find their own voice, find their own path in the music. I think because the music business is what it is today, it's not a simple progression of things, up a ladder, or it's very circular, and it can be angular, like, and you just have to be equipped, musically, and I think emotionally, to venture into different things and be super entrepreneurial.
Yeah, it's interesting you mentioned that because I remember just seeing your name in the liner notes for the new Rolling Stones album, where you played on two or three tracks there. So
Mm, me?
yeah,
Rolling Stones?
yep,
My name?
your name, tenor sax,
You,
different Ron Blake.
trumpet, maybe. Ron Blake trumpet?
Thought it was tenor sax, not trumpet. I will have to look at it.
Who? Yeah, I don't know who's doing the Stones gig right now. It's not me.
Oh, okay.
I would definitely know about that. But I could be wrong. I mean, if you find it, send it to me, because honestly, I was recording tracks from home for different people
Mm.
during the lockdown. So it is possible.
Ah,
I'm not going to rule it out. Now that you've brought it up, it's the new Rolling Stones
it's
record?
the Hackney Diamond one, and it's a track which was recorded probably before pandemic because Charlie was still alive. So I'll
Wow.
send it to you. I'll send you the email,
Yeah,
a
yeah.
picture of it. Yeah. Ron, I appreciate your time. I know I'm going a little bit over. Is there anything else you want to add?
Oh no, this has been Great. I really appreciate your time. Thanks for having me on the show. This has been a lot of fun. I'd like to just thank um, everyone that brought us together to make this happen. And, shout out to my team from Sim One to Terry and who we know and love, Terry Hinty and Jazz Dog for all the hard work that they're doing to get the record out there in radio land and all that. And yeah, and to everyone else, the family, the friends, the musicians that keep showing up and supported. We did two full houses at Dizzy's for the album release, and a lot of my friends, a lot of musicians came out to support, and that was really heartwarming.
Mhm.
So yeah, that's it. And thank you for your time once again.
Well,
This has
thank
been
you. I
fun.
hope
And
to get up there and see
hey,
you.
Roy, let's get a
Right.
little Roy
Okay.
Hargrove in there. All
Yes.
right.
Yes. Hope to get up there and see you. We get to New York occasionally, but I haven't seen a
Okay.
show in New York in a while. I just saw Christian McBride down here with his new group, so that was
Oh, with
wonderful.
New John. Yeah.
Yes,
Yeah.
fantastic. So take care, and hope to see you soon. Thanks for your time.
All right, Preston. You take care too.
Yep,
Bye
bye.
bye.